I take a deep breath as I step out of the car, my hand tightly clasped in Ethan's. The house looms before us, a stark reminder of the years of silence that stretch between Ethan and his father. I squeeze Ethan's hand, offering a reassuring smile. "It's going to be okay," I whisper, though the words feel hollow even to my own ears. Ethan nods, his jaw clenched tight. "Let's just get this over with," he mutters, striding towards the front door. I follow, my heart pounding in my chest as Ethan raises his hand to knock. The door swings open, revealing a man I've only seen in faded photographs. Frank, Ethan's father, stands before us, his face etched with lines of age and bitterness. "Ethan," he says, his voice gruff. "It's been a long time." "Dad," Ethan replies, his tone carefully neutral. "This is Zara, my wife." Frank's gaze shifts to me, his eyes narrowing slightly. "A pleasure," he says, though his tone suggests otherwise. We step inside, the house feeling strangely cold despite the warm summer day. Frank leads us to the living room, gesturing for us to sit. I perch on the edge of the couch, my hands folded tightly in my lap. "So," Frank begins, leaning back in his armchair, "what brings you here after all these years?" Ethan clears his throat, his eyes meeting mine briefly before he speaks. "Zara thought it was time we tried to mend things between us. For the sake of family." Frank scoffs, shaking his head. "Family? You haven't been much of a family to me, boy." I bristle at his words, but Ethan remains calm. "I know we've had our differences, Dad, but I'm here now, aren't I?" Frank grunts, his gaze shifting to the window. "I suppose you are." The conversation lulls, the tension thick in the air. I clear my throat, desperate to break the silence. "Ethan tells me you used to work in sales, Frank. What was that like?" Frank's eyes snap back to me, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. "It was a job," he says shortly. "Nothing more, nothing less." I nod, sensing that further questions won't be welcomed. We sit in awkward silence for a few more moments before Ethan stands abruptly. "We should get going," he says, his voice strained. "It's a long drive back." Frank nods, rising slowly from his chair. "Don't be a stranger," he says, though his words lack sincerity. We say our goodbyes, the door closing behind us with a heavy thud. As we walk back to the car, I can't shake the feeling that something is off. Frank's demeanor, his cold reception, it all feels wrong somehow. A month later, the phone rings. It's Frank, his voice tinged with desperation. "I need your help," he says, his words tumbling out in a rush. "I'm sick, and I can't take care of myself anymore. I need to move in with you and Ethan." I freeze, the phone nearly slipping from my grasp. "Move in with us?" After the way he treated Ethan at our visit, I glance at Ethan, seeing the conflicted emotions playing across his face. "We'll have to discuss it," I say finally, my voice trembling slightly. "Can we call you back?" Frank agrees, and I hang up the phone, my mind reeling. I turn to Ethan, my heart sinking at the look of resignation on his face. "He's my father," Ethan says softly. "I can't turn him away." I nod, knowing that Ethan's sense of duty will always win out in the end. But as we begin to make plans for Frank's arrival, I can't shake the feeling that we're making a terrible mistake. The day Frank moves in, I feel a sense of unease that I can't quite shake. Ethan and I help him settle into the guest room, arranging his few belongings and making sure he's comfortable. At first, things seem to be going smoothly. Frank is polite, even charming at times, and I start to think that maybe my initial reservations were unfounded. But as the weeks pass, I begin to notice little things that set off alarm bells in my head. Frank starts making offhand comments about money, hinting at the financial strain he's under. One evening, over dinner, he finally comes out with it. "I hate to ask," he says, his eyes downcast, "but I'm in a bit of a bind. My late wife, she left me with some significant gambling debts. I don't know how I'm going to pay them off." Ethan's fork clatters to his plate, his face etched with concern. "Dad, why didn't you say something sooner? We could have helped." Frank shakes his head, a wry smile on his lips. "I didn't want to be a burden, but now, living here with you, I thought maybe." He trails off, letting the implication hang in the air. I glance at Ethan, seeing the wheels turning in his head. "We can cover the debts," Ethan says finally, "and you can stay here with us, save on living costs. It's the least we can do." I open my mouth to protest, but the words die on my lips. How can I argue with Ethan's generosity, his desire to help his father? So I nod, forcing a smile onto my face. "Of course," I say, "we're family after all." Frank's face breaks into a grin. and he reaches across the table to clasp Ethan's hand. "Thank you, son. You don't know how much this means to me." But as I watch the exchange, I can't shake the feeling that something isn't right. There's a glint in Frank's eye, a calculating edge to his smile that makes my skin crawl. The next few weeks are a blur of financial discussions and budget adjustments. Ethan insists on paying off Frank's debts in full, even though it means dipping into our savings. I try to voice my concerns, but Ethan waves them away. "He's my father, Zara," he says, his voice firm. "I can't just turn my back on him." I nod, swallowing my objections. But as the days pass, I start to notice a change in Ethan. He seems distracted, distant, as if he's carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. One evening, he comes home late from work, his face drawn and tired. I'm in the kitchen, preparing dinner, when he walks in and slumps into a chair. "I quit my job today," he says, his voice barely above a whisper. I nearly drop the spoon I'm holding, my heart leaping into my throat. "What? Why?" Ethan runs a hand through his hair, his eyes meeting mine. "I want to start a nonprofit, Zara. I want to make a difference in the world." I stare at him, my mind reeling. A nonprofit? Now, when we're already stretched thin financially? But before I can voice my concerns, Frank walks into the kitchen, his face twisted into a scowl. "A nonprofit?" he sneers, his voice dripping with disdain. "How are you going to support us on that, boy? You think your little dream is more important than taking care of your family?" Ethan flinches as if he's been slapped, his face flushing with shame. "I just thought—" "You thought wrong," Frank snaps, cutting him off. "You're being selfish, Ethan. You can't afford to chase your dreams when you have responsibilities." I watch as Ethan seems to shrink before my eyes, his shoulders slumping in defeat. And in that moment, I realize the truth. Frank isn't here because he needs our help. He's here to manipulate us, to bleed us dry and break us down, and I'll be damned if I let him get away with it. The days turn into weeks, and Frank's presence in our home becomes increasingly suffocating. He seems to take pleasure in belittling Ethan at every turn, constantly reminding him of the financial strain his nonprofit is putting on our family. I try to shield Ethan from the worst of it, but Frank's words have a way of worming their way into his mind. I watch as my once confident husband starts to doubt himself, his dreams slowly crumbling under the weight of his father's disapproval. One evening, I overhear Frank talking to Ethan in the living room. His voice is loud, carrying easily through the thin walls. "You're a failure, Ethan," he says, his tone dripping with contempt. "You think you can change the world with your little nonprofit? You can't even take care of your own family." I feel a surge of anger rising in my chest, and I storm into the room, my eyes blazing. "That's enough, Frank," I snap, my voice trembling with rage. "You have no right to speak to Ethan that way." Frank turns to me, his face twisted into a sneer. "Stay out of this, Zara. This is between me and my son." But I refuse to back down. "Ethan is my husband," I say, my voice growing stronger with each word, "and I won't let you tear him down like this." Frank scoffs, shaking his head. "You don't understand, girl. I'm trying to help him, to make him see the error of his ways." I laugh, the sound harsh and bitter. "Help him? By crushing his dreams and making him feel worthless? That's not help, Frank. That's abuse." Ethan looks up at me, his eyes wide with surprise. I can see the gratitude in his gaze, the relief at having someone stand up for him. But Frank isn't finished. "You think you're so smart, don't you, Zara?" he says, his voice low and menacing. "You think you know what's best for Ethan? Well, let me tell you something. I'm his father, and I know what's best for him. And what's best is for him to give up this foolish dream and focus on taking care of his family." I shake my head, my heart breaking for Ethan. "You're wrong, Frank. Ethan's dream is what makes him who he is. It's what drives him, what gives him purpose, and I won't let you take that away from him." Frank's face darkens, and for a moment, I think he might lash out at me, but instead he turns and stalks out of the room, slamming the door behind him. I turn to Ethan, my heart aching at the defeated slump of his shoulders. "I'm so sorry," I whisper, pulling him into my arms. "I'm sorry you have to deal with this." Ethan clings to me, his body shaking with silent sobs. "I don't know what to do, Zara," he says, his voice muffled against my shoulder. "I feel like I'm being pulled in 1,000 different directions." I stroke his hair, my mind racing with possibilities, and then, suddenly, it hits me. The pieces fall into place, and I realize the truth of what's been happening. Ethan, I say, pulling back to look him in the eye, I think your father is manipulating us. I think he's been planning this from the start. Ethan frowns, his brow furrowing in confusion. What do you mean? I take a deep breath, my mind whirling with the implications of what I'm about to say. Think about it. He shows up out of nowhere, asking for money and a place to stay. He guilt-trips you into quitting your job and starting a nonprofit, knowing it will put a strain on our finances. And now he's constantly belittling you, making you feel like a failure. Ethan's eyes widen, and I can see the realization dawning on his face. You're right, he says, his voice barely above a whisper. But why? Why would he do this? I shake my head, my heart heavy with the knowledge of what we're up against. I don't know, I say, but I intend to find out. The next day, I wait until Ethan leaves for work before confronting Frank. I find him in the living room, lounging in his armchair with a newspaper in his lap. We need to talk, I say, my voice tight with anger. Frank looks up at me, his eyes narrowing. About what? I take a deep breath, steeling myself for the conversation to come. I know what you're doing, Frank. I know you're manipulating Ethan, trying to bleed us dry. Frank's face hardens, and he sets the newspaper aside. I don't know what you're talking about, Zara. I'm just a concerned father, trying to look out for my son. I shake my head, my hands clenching into fists at my sides. No, you're not. You're a liar and a manipulator, and I won't let you get away with it. Frank stands up, his face twisting into a sneer. You don't know anything, girl. You think you can come into my family and start making accusations? You have no idea what you're talking about. I stand my ground, refusing to be intimidated. I know more than you think, Frank. I know about your debts, about how you've been using Ethan to pay them off. Frank's eyes widen, and for a moment I see a flicker of fear cross his face, but then his expression hardens, and he takes a step towards me. You think you're so clever, don't you, Zara? He says, his voice low and menacing. You think you've got it all figured out. Well, let me tell you something. You're right, I am in debt. But it's not from gambling. It's from failed business ventures, investments that went south. I stare at him, my mind reeling with the implications of his words. So, you've been using Ethan to bail you out? To pay off your mistakes? Frank shrugs, a cruel smile playing at the corners of his mouth. What can I say? The boy owes me. I raised him, put a roof over his head. The least he can do is help his old man out in his time of need. I feel a surge of disgust rising in my throat, and I have to fight the urge to slap the smug look off his face. You're despicable, I spit, my voice trembling with rage. You're taking advantage of Ethan's love for you, his sense of duty. You're destroying him, piece by piece. Frank laughs, the sound harsh and grating. Destroying him? Please. I'm making him stronger, teaching him the realities of life, and if he can't handle it, well, that's his problem. I shake my head, my heart breaking for Ethan. You're wrong, Frank. Ethan is one of the strongest people I know, and he doesn't need you, not anymore. Frank's face darkens, and he takes another step towards me. You think you can turn him against me? You think you can take my son away from me? I stand my ground, my chin lifted in defiance. I'm not taking him away from you, Frank. You're doing that yourself, with your lies and your manipulations. Frank's hand twitches at his side, and for a moment I think he might strike me. But instead, he turns away, his shoulders slumping in defeat. You don't understand, Zara, he says, his voice barely above a whisper. I have a plan, a way to get out of this mess. I was going to sell the house, force you and Ethan out. I even turned his sister against you, convinced her to take my side. I stare at him, my mind reeling with the depths of his betrayal. You monster, I whisper, my voice trembling with emotion. You would destroy your own family just to save yourself? Frank turns back to me, his face a mask of desperation. I have no choice, Zara. I'm drowning in debt, and I need a way out. I shake my head, my resolve hardening. No, Frank, you do have a choice. You can face the consequences of your actions like a man. You can tell Ethan the truth and beg for his forgiveness. Frank's face twists into a sneer, and he turns away from me. I won't do that, Zara. I can't. I nod, my heart heavy with the knowledge of what I must do. Then I will, Frank. I'll tell Ethan everything, and we'll see how he reacts. But one thing is for sure. You won't be staying in this house any longer. Not if I have anything to say about it. The next few days are a blur of activity. I know I need to act fast, to gather evidence of Frank's betrayal before he has a chance to put his plan into action. I start by secretly recording our conversations, hiding my phone in my pocket and letting it capture every vile word that spills from Frank's lips. He talks about his debts, about his plans to sell the house and leave us with nothing. He even brags about turning Olivia against us, convincing her that we're the enemy. It's sickening to listen to, but I force myself to keep going, to gather as much evidence as I can. I know I'll need it if I'm going to convince Ethan of the truth. Finally, after days of recording, I have what I need. I wait until Ethan gets home from work, then pull him aside, my heart pounding in my chest. "There's something you need to hear," I say, my voice trembling with emotion. I play the recordings for him, watching as his face goes from confusion to shock to anger. He listens in silence, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. When the last recording ends, he looks up at me, his eyes blazing with fury. "I can't believe it," he whispers, his voice hoarse with emotion. "My own father betraying me like this." I nod, my heart breaking for him. "I'm so sorry, Ethan. I know how much you love him, how much you wanted to believe in him." Ethan shakes his head, his jaw clenched tight. "No, Zara, you were right all along. He's been using me, manipulating me, and I let him do it." I reach out and take his hand, squeezing it gently. "It's not your fault, Ethan. He's your father, and you wanted to believe the best of him. But now we need to focus on protecting ourselves, on getting away from him before he can hurt us anymore." Ethan nods, his eyes hardening with resolve. "You're right. We need to sell the house, move out before he realizes what's happening." We spend the next few days in a flurry of activity, contacting real estate agents and packing up our belongings. We work in secret, but I was careful not to let Frank catch on to our plans. Finally, the day arrives. We found a buyer for the house, and everything is in place for us to move out. I wait until Frank leaves for one of his mysterious errands, then call Olivia, my hands shaking as I dial her number. "Olivia, it's Zara," I say when she answers. "There's something you need to hear." I play the recordings for her, my heart pounding as I wait for her reaction. At first, there's only silence on the other end of the line. Then I hear a sharp intake of breath, followed by a string of curses. "That bastard," Olivia says, her voice trembling with anger. "I can't believe I let him manipulate me like that." I feel a surge of relief wash over me, and I let out a shaky breath. "It's not your fault, Olivia. He's good at what he does. But now we need to stand together to make sure he can't hurt anyone else." Olivia agrees, and we spend the next hour plotting our next move. By the time we hang up, I feel a sense of hope stirring in my chest. Maybe, just maybe, we can come out of this stronger than ever. The next day, Ethan and I load the last of our belongings into the moving truck and drive away from the house that has caused us so much pain. As we pull out of the driveway, I catch a glimpse of Frank's face in the rearview mirror. He looks shocked, angry, and maybe even a little afraid. But I don't let myself feel sorry for him. He made his choices, and now he has to live with the consequences. And as for Ethan and me, we have a whole new life ahead of us, one free from lies and manipulation. And I know deep in my heart that we're going to be just fine. We're barely settled into our new apartment when the phone rings. It's Frank, his voice tight with anger. "What the hell do you think you're doing, Ethan?" he shouts, his words slurring together. "You can't just sell the house and leave me with nowhere to go." Ethan takes a deep breath, his hand clenching the phone so tightly his knuckles turn white. "It's done, Dad. The house is sold, and we're not coming back." Frank lets out a string of curses, his voice rising with each word. "You ungrateful little bastard. After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me?" I see the pain flash across Ethan's face, and I reach out to take his hand, squeezing it gently. He looks at me, his eyes filled with gratitude, and turns back to the phone. "You haven't done anything for me, Dad. You've been using me, manipulating me for your own gain, and I'm done letting you control my life." Frank scoffs, his voice dripping with disdain. "You think you're so smart, don't you, Ethan? You think you can just walk away from me? From your family?" Ethan's jaw clenches, and I can see the anger building in his eyes. "You're not my family, Dad. Not anymore. A real family doesn't lie and cheat and steal from each other." There's a long pause on the other end of the line, and for a moment I think Frank might have hung up. But then his voice comes through the speaker, low and menacing. "You'll regret this, Ethan. You and that bitch wife of yours. You think you can just walk away from me? You have no idea what I'm capable of." I feel a chill run down my spine at his words, but Ethan doesn't flinch. "I know exactly what you're capable of, Dad. And that's why we're walking away. You can't hurt us anymore." He hangs up the phone, his hand trembling slightly as he sets it down on the table. I wrap my arms around him, holding him close as he takes a shuddering breath. "I'm so proud of you," I whisper, my voice thick with emotion. "You did the right thing, Ethan. You stood up to him, and you won." Ethan nods, his eyes filling with tears. "I couldn't have done it without you, Zara. You gave me the strength to fight back, to take control of my life." I smile, brushing a tear from his cheek. "We did it together, Ethan, and we'll keep doing it together, no matter what comes our way." The next few days are tense, as we wait for Frank to make his next move. But as the weeks pass and nothing happens, we start to relax, to settle into our new life. And then, one day, there's a knock at the door. I open it to find Olivia standing there, her face streaked with tears. "I'm so sorry, Zara," she whispers, her voice trembling. "I should have believed you from the start. I should have known that Dad was lying to me." I pull her into a hug, my own eyes filling with tears. "It's okay, Olivia, you're here now, and that's all that matters." We spend the next few hours talking, catching up on all the time we've lost. Olivia tells us about her own struggles with Frank, about how he's been trying to turn her against us for years. "But I see the truth now," she says, her voice filled with determination, "and I'm not going to let him control me anymore. I'm done being his pawn." Ethan nods, his eyes shining with pride. "We're in this together, Olivia. All of us. We'll stand up to him, and we'll win." As the sun sets outside our window, I feel a sense of peace wash over me. We've been through so much, Ethan and I, but we've come out stronger on the other side. And with Olivia by our side, I know that nothing can stop us now. We're a family, a real family, and we'll face whatever comes our way together. A few days later, we get another call from Frank. This time it's Olivia he's after, his voice desperate and pleading. "Olivia, sweetheart, you have to help me," he begs, his words tumbling out in a rush. "I'm in trouble, and I need a place to stay. You're my only hope." Olivia's face hardens, and she grips the phone tighter. "No, Dad, I'm not going to help you. Not after everything you've done." Frank's voice rises, his anger palpable even through the phone. "You ungrateful little brat. I raised you, I gave you everything, and this is how you repay me?" Olivia takes a deep breath, her eyes flashing with determination. "You didn't give me anything, Dad. You took from me, you manipulated me, you tried to turn me against my own brother, and I'm done letting you control my life." There's a long pause, and then Frank's voice comes through the speaker, low and menacing. "You'll regret this, Olivia. You and your brother and that bitch wife of his. You think you can just turn your back on me? You have no idea what I'm capable of." But Olivia doesn't flinch. "I know exactly what you're capable of, Dad, and that's why I'm saying no. You can't hurt me anymore, and you can't hurt Ethan and Zara either. We're done with you." She hangs up the phone, her hand shaking slightly as she sets it down. Ethan wraps an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "I'm so proud of you, Olivia," he says, his voice thick with emotion. "You did the right thing." Olivia nods, leaning into his embrace. "I couldn't have done it without you and Zara. You showed me what real love looks like, what a real family is supposed to be." I feel my own eyes fill with tears as I watch them, my heart swelling with love and pride. We've been through so much together, the three of us, but we've come out stronger on the other side. The next day, Ethan and I make a decision. We're going to use the money from the sale of the house to pay off Frank's debts, to free ourselves from his grip once and for all. We contact his creditors, explaining the situation and offering to settle his debts in full. It's not easy and it takes a big chunk out of our savings, but in the end, it's worth it. We meet with Frank one last time in a neutral location with Olivia by our side. He looks haggard, his eyes bloodshot and his clothes rumpled. "What do you want?" he asks, his voice hoarse and defeated. Ethan steps forward, his chin held high. "We're here to tell you that your debts have been paid, Dad. You're free and clear." Frank's eyes widen, and for a moment, I see a flicker of hope cross his face. But then, his expression hardens and he narrows his eyes. "What's the catch?" he asks, his voice dripping with suspicion. I step forward, my own voice steady and clear. There is no catch, Frank. We paid off your debts because we wanted to be free of you, once and for all. But that freedom comes at a price. You're on your own now, and you'll have to find your own way in the world. Frank's face crumples, and for a moment, I almost feel sorry for him. But then I remember all the pain he's caused, all the lies he's told, and my sympathy vanishes. You can't do this to me, he whispers, his voice breaking. I'm your father, Ethan. You can't just abandon me. Ethan shakes his head, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and resolve. You stopped being my father the moment you chose to lie to me, to manipulate me for your own gain. And now, you have to face the consequences of your actions. We turn to leave, our hearts heavy, but our heads held high. As we walk away, I hear Frank's voice behind us, a broken whisper that tears at my heart. I'm sorry, he says, his words barely audible. I'm so sorry. But it's too late for apologies, too late for forgiveness. We've made our choice, and we're not looking back. Months pass, and life goes on. Ethan and I settle into our new routine, our new life together. His nonprofit takes off, and I watch with pride as he pours his heart and soul into making a difference in the world. Olivia becomes a regular fixture in our lives, stopping by for dinner and movie nights, her laughter filling our home with warmth and joy. It's like we've always been this way, a family bound by love and trust, not by blood or obligation. But even as we move forward, the shadow of Frank still lingers. Ethan tries to hide it, but I can see the pain in his eyes whenever his father's name is mentioned, the guilt that still weighs heavy on his heart. One day, I come home from work to find Ethan sitting at the kitchen table, his head in his hands. I rush to his side, my heart pounding with worry. What's wrong? I ask, my voice trembling. Is it your dad? Did something happen? Ethan looks up at me, his eyes red-rimmed and bloodshot. I talked to Olivia today. She said Dad's not doing well. He's living in some run-down apartment, barely getting by on Social Security. She thinks we should reach out to him, try to make amends. I feel a flare of anger at the mention of Frank, but I push it down, focusing on Ethan's pain. What do you want to do? I ask, my voice gentle. Ethan shakes his head, his eyes filling with tears. I don't know, Zara. Part of me wants to help him, to be the bigger person. But another part of me is still so angry, so hurt by what he did. I don't know if I can forgive him. I take his hand in mine, squeezing it gently. You don't have to forgive him, Ethan. What he did to you, to us, is unforgivable. But maybe you can find a way to let go of the anger, to move on with your life. Ethan nods, his jaw clenching with determination. You're right. I need to let go, to focus on the future, not the past. We decide to reach out to Frank, to offer him a small monthly stipend to help with his expenses. It's not much, but it's a start, a way to ease the guilt that still weighs on Ethan's heart. But when we try to contact him, we're met with silence. Calls go unanswered, emails bounce back undeliverable. It's like Frank has disappeared, vanished into thin air. Weeks turn into months, and still, there's no word from him. Olivia tries to track him down, but even she comes up empty-handed. It's like he's gone, a ghost haunting the edges of our lives. And then one day, there's a knock at the door. I open it to find a man standing there, his face lined with age and sorrow. I'm sorry to bother you, he says, his voice hesitant, but I'm looking for Frank Johnson. I'm his landlord, and I haven't seen him in weeks. I was hoping you might know where he is. I feel a chill run down my spine at his words, a sense of dread settling in the pit of my stomach. I'm sorry, I say, my voice shaking. We haven't heard from Frank in months. Is everything okay? The man shakes his head, his eyes filled with pity. I'm afraid not. Frank's apartment was a mess when I went in there. It looks like he hasn't been taking care of himself. I found a bunch of empty bottles, some pills scattered on the floor. I think he might be in trouble. I nod, my heart heavy with sorrow. Thank you for letting us know. We'll do what we can to find him, to get him the help he needs. But even as I say the words, I know it's too late. Frank is gone, lost to his own demons, his own mistakes, and all we can do is pick up the pieces, to try to build a life without him. As I close the door, I feel a sense of sadness wash over me. But I also feel a sense of hope, a sense of possibility. We've been through so much, Ethan and I, but we've come out stronger on the other side. And whatever the future holds, I know we'll face it together, hand in hand, heart to heart, because that's what family does. That's what love is all about.